Welcome back to the Blazor Server In-Depth course. In this lesson, we're looking at the Razor syntax for our Blazor pages. So the Razor syntax actually works pretty much across all the different .NET Core offerings, or ASP.NET Core offerings. So MVC and Razor pages and Blazor pages and components. Okay, so we're going to look at what this is, and we have a few tweaks to it that are Blazor specific. So let's create a new project, Blazor app, call this Blazor 5 or Blazor app, and we'll call this, let's get it highlighted there, Razor syntax demo. Hit create. Again, make sure it's .NET Core 3.1, Blazor server app, HTTPS, hit create. And now that created, what we can do is we can start looking at our pages. Let's go to the counter page. It's a simple page, but it has some nice things on it we can see. Now you've probably already seen some of this or worked with some of this, but I want to be explicit in making sure we understand what all the Razor syntax can do. Now the Razor syntax is shown by this @ symbol. So right in front of @current count, that @ says, okay, I'm going to put some C# code here. Now, the really cool thing is with Razor is that it can mix C# and HTML with some pretty cool understanding of it too. It's pretty good at parsing, okay, we're back to HTML now. For example, current count, we said @current count, which is a variable. So it put C# code here, but then there wasn't even a space, and we have the closed paragraph tag, and it knows, oh, that's HTML again. I'm going to go ahead and drop back to HTML and not stay in C# mode. So that's what the @ symbol is for. So if we had another variable, we could just put it in here. So for example, private string test. This is a test, like so. And now we could say, right down below, we can say a paragraph tag, and then in here we can say @test. And now that will put that test right on our page below our current count before our button. And I'll show you this. I won't go through and show you every single one necessarily, but I do want to show you just how easy it is to create something in Razor. So there's that. This is a test. So again, we can mix our HTML and our C#, and the C# is typically indicated with an @ symbol in front of whatever C# we want to run or put in this place. Now, that's a simple one, but what if we have a Twitter handle? So for right here, instead of putting @test, I want to have @IamTimCorey, which is my Twitter handle. But it starts with an @ already, and that's indicating Razor, but I don't want it to. Well, I can just hit @ again and escape it. So now it has a double @, but if we run this, it's only going to be a single one. This is the escape character. So if you need to have a hard-coded or a just an @ symbol and not actually being used in this as Razor syntax, you put it twice in a row. All right, so that's @IamTimCorey. Only has one @ because the Razor syntax has two to escape it. All right, so that's how we do that. And let's actually put the previous one in there. I'm going to try and save these for you so you have the different examples. Now, what if you want to say, let's create two variables here. So private int I equals 5 and private int j equals 6. And you want to say something like this, where you say @I minus j. Okay? So you want to see, actually plus. Let's do plus. So we want to add I plus j and see that value here. Well, if we run this, we're going to be kind of disappointed. Because when we run this, it's not going to show that value. It says 5 plus j, which isn't right. Also, we need to have some breakpoints in here. Let's just put some real simple breaks in here. All right, so why didn't this do I plus J? Well, it got to this white space here and said, I'm pretty sure that's not C# anymore. I think that's actually HTML. And so it dropped back to HTML. How do you fix this? Well, we can put parens around the start and the end. So now we have at, open paren, close paren, and this is going to give us I plus J, and the value will be what we expect it to be, which is 11. All right, so there's the 11. So that's how you can put more than one thing together or have a space in there and so on. There's also, if you wanted to have multiple lines, which we'll do the same thing, but we could have multiple lines here. We can say at, and then curly brace, and then inside here, you can say I plus J if you want, or something else. You can have multiple lines of C# code there. Now, this is not going to run because it says, hey, wait, you're not actually outputting anything here. Even a semicolon won't fix that because we're not actually outputting anything. But if we said return, and that won't work either. Because this right here, the curly braces, is more like a part of your class or a part of your processing. So I could say in here, let's do, I don't know, var k equals I times j. All right? So that does some work there. And then down here, I could say at k. All right? Notice it's now available. So this is like putting code in the middle. I typically don't do this as much because, again, that's kind of mixing things. I'd rather put my code in my code section, whether it's down at the bottom, which, again, I don't prefer, or that partial class. But either way, I don't want to have it kind of mixed in here. This is more for display, but just know you can do this. So if I run this, I plus j, that should be 30. So we should see 30 for our last line. And there we go. Now, let's talk about what if you have some type of, let's say a string that you want to display. So let's start with this. We're going to do open and close paren, and we'll have a couple double quotes. And in here, I'm going to say H1, this is a big test, /H1. How is that going to render? I've got it inside my paren, so it's saying it's a C# code, but the string that I'll be outputting is actually HTML. Well, yes and no. Let's run this, and you'll see that it's not really HTML. Instead, what it is a string. Notice the H1 tags. In fact, if we hit F12 here, which open up a new window, here, let's just shrink this down a little bit. And let's go to that H1 and look, we scroll down, it's actually putting it in quotes because it's actually rendering it as text. So even though it has what appears to be HTML markup, it's not actually marking up as HTML. All right, so let's close that down. And now what we're going to do is figure out how to render this. Now, I do want to take a pause right now to say, this is something you have to be very careful of. I'm going to show you because there are times when you'll need it. But do not let the user render their own HTML. Be very careful where this HTML comes from so you don't render something malicious. But there is a way to take a string and render it as HTML. And the way you do that is to say at HTML.raw. And then in here, you put your HTML. Put the same string. Oops, I think it's lowercase h. Well, no, that's how you do that if you were in Razor Pages or MVC. But it turns out that Blazor does things a bit differently. So even though it is Razor syntax, it's not quite the same flavor as everything else. A little frustrating? Sure. But what we'll do is we'll take this off. So it's just the at and then the open and close parens like before. But between the open paren and the open double quotes, we're going to put another set of parens. Inside there, we're going to say markup string. So we're casting this string to a type markup string. All right, now let's run this one more time. So now you should have the string up above that's just a string, but looks like HTML. And then we'll have this as a big test in H1 font. Again, this isn't something that you want to do without being sure of what this value is coming through. But it can be pretty powerful if you use it responsibly. Now, what else can Razor syntax do for us? We can see down here, this is something that is unique to Blazor as well, and that is the @on types. So on click, which if you're familiar with WinForms, WPF, that looks very familiar. We kind of know those type of events. Well, we have those same events, but now in a Blazor project, in a Blazor app or page. So @onClick allows us to run this method. But the cool thing is we have more than that. So for example, if I go up to this paragraph tag and I say notice there's a whole bunch of different things we can do. Notice all the different options we have here, and a lot of them start with on. So on, we can say on mouse. We have a bunch of different mouse events. So on mouse over equals increment count. Let's call the same method. Okay, so now we have mouse over this paragraph. We're going to increment the count. Let's run this again. And now you go to counter and watch the counter value. Notice it's going up. I haven't clicked on anything yet. I'm just moving my mouse over things, and that counter value keeps scrolling up. And I'm moving my mouse over the paragraph and off. All right, so that's pretty cool. We actually have a lot of the same events that we would with a WPF or a WinForm project, but now we have it on the web. So the @on events, if you look at pretty much anything you look at, you say @on, and you'll see some type of value or event you can hook into. So those are a really big part of Blazor and how to make it a lot more like a client-side application where you can have that single page application feel, and yet we're calling the code on the server. All right, and then we use the signal R for that connection. So that's a really big one. But then how do we do control flows? Like, for example, what if we have, data that might be there or might not be there? An example of this would be the fetch data page. If forecast is null, then say loading. So @if, and notice the rest of it looks like an actual if statement in C#, but if, and then it has HTML in here. So say if forecast is null, say loading. Else, show the table with the loop through for each forecast. All right? So that would allow us to have this loading page and then switch over once we have values. Now, you've never seen this because this loading page takes or goes too fast. So let's put a little bit of delay in our code. Let's go to the weather forecast service. And right now we have a return task from result where we're getting these values. But let's put in a wait in here where, actually, you know what? Maybe we want to put it before here. Let's look at the fetch page. Yeah, we're fetching right here. we have an await already here. So let's do this, await task.delay, and let's say, let's do 5 seconds. So you fully see this task in operation. All right, now we're going to run this. What's going to happen is the forecast is going to take 5 seconds to load. Your code, and you mix the two together. Again, this is C# code, which may feel a little weird mixing C# and HTML, but this is really just display code. As long as you're not doing real work, which is why I'm not a huge fan of this right here, because this is kind of doing some real work. But as long as you're just doing display work with your C#, that's great. That's what it's for. So definitely take advantage of it, make use of it, and give it a shot. Try it out with your different pages and different ideas. Put some things together and just see how you could lay it out using that razor syntax to really boost your HTML. In the case of the raise or the fetch data page, we have our if statement and else, but then we have our body where we have a for each, where it creates a new table row for each record in the forecasts list. So now our page is dynamically growing or shrinking depending on our C# data. So pretty cool stuff you can do with Razor, the Razor syntax. Again, it's Blazor is the project type. Razor is the extension because it's a Razor component, which is a Blazor page. I know it's all confusing, but I'm trying to be clear here. And then the Razor syntax indicates this @ symbol that you put in HTML. That's the Razor syntax. So @ for each, or @ in your variable name, and so on. So that's the Razor syntax, and that's what we're using on our Blazor page. Well, that's it for this lesson. Time to practice what you've learned. Try it out. Try a few different things. Build a few different pages. And then once you're done, come on back for the next lesson where we dive even deeper.